Hi, how are you? It's great to be here. I have no props. I'm not going to be shooting anything into the audience. I have no slides. You're just going to have to listen and talk to me. And I'm hoping that we're going to actually have a little bit of a time for questions at the end, because I definitely want to tune it to the audience. Just so I get a sense for who's here, how many people are working in a startup company? Okay, wow, that's awesome. You know, that was definitely not the case growing up in Montreal. For me, I'm a Montrealer, by the way. Very proud to be here. Yes, it is great. It's obviously it's an awesome city, and it's incredible to be having this dialogue now about kind of creating kind of high-value startups, because we definitely didn't talk about that in the 90s when I was graduating. We didn't talk about venture capital. In fact, there weren't that many people doing it, and not really anybody in Montreal. And so the opportunities that you guys have today are dramatically different. And so hopefully these types of events, sorry, my iPad's turning off every 2 seconds. These type of events help you, kind of appreciate what the opportunities are. I'm going to talk briefly about the unicorns, but because everybody else has talked about them, otherwise I wouldn't have. There are 116 of them in the world. 70 of them are in the US, and one in Canada, which is Hootsuite. Those are just, kind of private companies that have decided not to go public. There's nothing really that, in the old days there'd just be a lot more public companies, and these companies are private. That's part of it. And then part of it is we're just in this incredible time with mobile, frankly, being, I think, the biggest transformation, just empowering a lot of things, and this is around the world. So there's like 15, of these companies in China. There's 6 or 7 in India, kind of, let's say a dozen in Europe, 2 in Israel. They're all over the place. And so in my new job at Google, which I'll tell you about in a second, I get to travel around and meet with them, and companies like them. Have met with, kind of probably 100 out of the 116, and multiple times. And what I've discovered is that a lot of them have a lot of traits that Google has, which is where I'm working today. And so as I reflected on what I wanted to talk about here, because it's really my first time speaking in Montreal, and I, kind of thought about it a lot. I said, well, I'm going to compare how I thought about things when I first started out in Montreal, and that was in the 90s, so there's a lot of context, and how I think about things today as a consequence, largely, of working at Google. And as was mentioned in the introduction, the first lesson for me from being at Google was to think big. So just diving back, I'll just give you a sense on my background, because I think it's important to understand, kind of what I've done and how I think about things. I think anytime you're getting, kind of advice or sharing perspectives with people, it's critical to know what their background is. Like, I went to law school because someone told me it was a good idea if I wanted to do deals, and it turned out to not be a good idea. But they were a lawyer, so obviously they're going to tell you what they think is a good idea. So just for my own background, I grew up in Montreal, as I said. I was a serial entrepreneur from, let's say, the early 90s to 2005, which is when I joined Google. I ran marketing for Google globally, so every product in every country. And then I ran corporate development for Google. We did 100 acquisitions during the 5 years that I managed the function. And then in 2013, I started Google Capital, which is a late-stage growth equity arm for Google. My last company that I started took that more niche-y approach. We were a social gaming company in 2002, which was super early. Gaming was, kind of online, interactive gaming wasn't really happening, so social gaming was, kind of an even smaller portion of it. And the rationale was like any other business. Like, I wanted to play games with my brother. He lived in New York. We always had trouble connecting. It was a good idea, and we had a good exit. It was like a kind of 9-figure exit, but it didn't last, and it kind of wasn't enduring. And I wouldn't say I really appreciated how much better it would be to start with a much bigger mission until I joined Google. So most people know Google's mission to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. That's a we can still run with that mission 15 years in. What's unbelievable is the impact of having such a broad vision up front. The quality of the first 20 employees at Google really transformed the trajectory of the business. When Google was started in '98, they were like the last search engine to the party. There was Direct Hit, there was Ask Jeeves, there was Inktomi, which was bought by Yahoo, there was AltaVista. It was a pretty crowded space. So if Google had thought of themselves as a search engine, it wouldn't have sounded that interesting to people. But Google thought of themselves as organizing the world's information. In the very early days, they were already thinking about book search. They already had robots going when they were still in the garage about how they would turn pages of books, which wasn't that different than what we did in the early 2000s, where we just built a lot of these machines turning books and scanning pages. They also, Street View, Larry Page was going around taking pictures of the streets and trying to imagine, kind of what Street View would look like. So in 1998, when they had no revenue, very few users, there were only 50 million users on the whole internet, so very few users, they were already thinking about this kind of long-term vision. Obviously, they kind of needed to stage it. But just having that energy kind of makes a fundamental difference. And what's ironic is that it's actually a little easier sometimes to start with these bigger projects, because bigger projects end up attracting these good people, as I mentioned, but can't overstate, and it's actually easier to attract money around them. So a lot of times it's a little counterintuitive, but it's pretty impressive. And again, I say this is not true just of Google. If you look at Uber, they're trying to organize transportation, kind of Airbnb, kind of changing the whole hospitality sector. Snapchat, all of these companies are, started with the intention of changing the world in some way, and it's just the momentum for them is just a lot easier to get going. Most people don't tell you this, but entrepreneurship is really about selling. You're first selling to entrepreneurs, you're selling to investors, you're selling to your customers, journalists, vendors, landlords. You're basically constantly selling, and it's great to sell something that you're passionate about and sell something that people are going to get excited about. So for a lot of reasons, my kind of biggest lesson and first lesson from Google, and it really is it continues to blow me away. I'm really fortunate to work with, kind of such ambitious people, but just the scale of their ambition and the way they think has just pushed me to think a lot bigger, and, you should try and surround yourself with people like that, because I think it's super healthy in, kind of a mindset of creating a business. My second thing, big lesson from Google may sound like the opposite, but it's actually quite complementary, which is to focus very intently on one thing. I'm going to explain what I mean. At Xfire, we did focus on one thing. We created this product for gamers to interact with each other, and I was like, okay, that's an innovation. And it was. Well, I don't want to totally diminish what it was. Google equivalent would have been the search algorithm, which was an innovation. It was a good search algorithm, but that's not how Google thought about, kind of focusing on one thing. They thought about the whole service. So speed was critical in kind of the founders' minds to the success of the product, and so they built their own servers. They crammed them in the box. They kind of then weren't happy even with kind of having more servers, like 50 times more than their competitors, which made them way faster. They kind of then built their own database infrastructure, which now kind of everybody can use, and they just basically took a more holistic view of the service, and that kind of led to kind of the book search and everything else, just taking a broader view of kind of what all the world's information is. They also did things that that just forced the product managers to think more expansively. So from the beginning, Google products had to be international. So you couldn't launch a product just in the US, which meant the way you had to code it for different languages or different currencies just forced you to be, kind of take a little bit more time up front, but allow you to kind of scale much quicker, and that's why I think Google was able to expand kind of faster than kind of any other internet company of the time across the world. They hated advertising, which is ironic for a company that makes all its money off advertising, so much that they kind of basically put a constraint on their product managers until AdWords was developed. Kind of a relevant advertising mechanism. And I don't think it would have been invented had they not basically thought, okay, we want to bring the world's people as information, and the ads need to be as high quality as the information. And if you look at the whole relevance of the page today, part of it is contributed, like the number goes up when you have ads versus just the search results. And I don't know why they're waving at me, but that's hopefully not a bad thing. Little things like the ad sign-up flow. These are kind of small examples, but they're all critical. Yahoo had kind of very similar advertising. They bought a company, Omniture, and you would go through the process of signing up, and 2 weeks later, they would basically approve your ads and you could get going. Whereas Google, you went through the process, you signed up, you could launch your ads right away. It wasn't that they weren't also worried about fraud. They actually could figure out fraud using kind of heuristics. But they basically allowed you to go online right away and get that experience, and they'd go after the kind of 1 or 2 out of 1,000 bad apples. So the whole process was built to scale from the beginning. And one of the common refrains, like from Larry and Sergey, is, well, kind of what happens when we have like 1 billion users? What happens when we have 1 million employees? Like they're constantly pushing management of the company to think, well, what's it going to be like, and how's this going to work when it's kind of 100x bigger than you could even imagine? And that forces you to kind of think about scalability right from the start. And if you don't think about it right from the start, it's basically not going to happen. Every function of Google was basically rethought, like whether you were in HR, which we don't even call HR, or real estate. You got to plan for this 1 million employees potentially. So you basically are always thinking about scaling your business. And that leads to a highly efficient business. So Google, kind of this new breed of tech company, are doing like they're astronomically efficient. Both Facebook and Google do over $1 million of revenue per employee, which is unbelievable if you think about it, and $250,000 of profit at Google per employee, which again is a pretty astronomical figure. So I said I'm going to keep on time, so I'm going to try and rush through this last part. And hopefully you guys have questions, otherwise we'll have just wasted 2 minutes. The last thing is culture. Everybody kind of talks about culture, and it's really hard to kind of pin it down. It really doesn't matter what your culture is. You don't need to give away free food. You don't need to kind of have a totally engineering-driven culture. But you need to actually think about your culture. And again, this is one of those things that I didn't really think about as closely as I should have when I was starting even my last company, and that was my 4th company. So I'll give you an example. We had, kind of someone working for us who wasn't as good as everyone else, and just wasn't kind of pulling his weight. We kept him on because it was just easier. Like switching him out would have required us to kind of find someone else. We might have lost 6 months. We didn't want to lose 6 months. We made a compromise, and those little things chip away at your culture, and they're easy to do. And once you go down that path, it's very hard to put the genie back in the bottle. So the key elements of Google's culture, I'll just highlight them for you because I think they're interesting, is number 1 is the risk-taking element of it. The philosophy is quite simple. If you're going to be in a risky business, which all startups are, you want to basically take as many risks as possible as fast as you can, because then obviously you'll have a better chance of success. So failing fast is kind of very well revered at Google, very much revered at Google, and it's kind of, I think, one of the things that's made Google successful. It's why people would even try something like Project Loon, which is these balloons that kind of fly at kind of way above what planes fly, and use allow people to get internet access in rural places like Africa. So still today, this crazy risk-taking is taking place. The second thing is accountability. Google has like a super rigorous process of creating corporate goals. So every quarter, everybody writes up their goals, and they tree up, and then the management looks at them, and they kind of rethink them, and then they tree down, tree up, and then we basically have our corporate goals for the quarter. That takes a lot of work. And even during the times when Larry and Sergey weren't running the company and they were a little bit more disengaged, they never missed an OKR meeting, and they kind of spent a lot of time on that, just like they spend a lot of time on the annual report, all these things where they can kind of shape the direction of the company. There's a lot of little things you can do even when a company is at scale. People may not know Larry still approves every hire. It's not like he actually reads every packet of every hire. We're hiring, kind of over 1,000 people a quarter. But he randomly will pick out a packet. And by doing that, and then he'll ask the hiring manager, like, what do you think about this? This kind of seems weird, or I don't know, are you sure this person's good enough? And then that person has to defend it, which means he has to have a hiring meeting below, and that person has to defend their packet and all the way down. So it just adds, you basically look for places where you can put your finger in the dike and kind of protect the system. And in that case, it's a really fast-growing company. Most people just want to hire like as fast as they can because they've got problems they want to kind of like address them. And Larry's like, I don't want to hire people that aren't kind of at that caliber. So it's a really smart place to put the dike. The last thing, and you're probably all doing this in your company. I don't think I did it as much as I should because I was always so anxious about kind of getting to the next stages. You have to enjoy the journey. You may succeed, you may not succeed. It's critical to kind of enjoy the way along, and I think you guys all know we have a lot of free food at Google. We get our laundry done. There's kind of a lot of things, kind of to make our lives better, but it wasn't that. It was kind of intended to create a culture where people felt really satisfied. I think of the kind of 2,000 or 3,000 people when I joined, almost half of them are still at Google. It's astounding how much this culture kind of benefits you. So that's it for kind of the prepared remarks. I have like literally 45 seconds, but hopefully that will be enough to answer at least one question, if there is one. Someone's got to ask me. Yes?
When you hire people at Google, how do you hire for a position at Google? All these diverse roles that
Yeah, so the question is, how do we hire at Google? I think we've gotten a lot better at it, to be honest. I think in the early days, we only hired engineers. So kind of like they could kind of quiz them and make sure that they're kind of on track in terms of like, heuristic test. Then later, we started hiring more businessy roles, and it was hard to see. We looked for a track record of success. We actually found that it's, if someone even out of college, they've been a great leader, kind of like in high school and college, you can basically predict the arc of their success. And that's what I do when I'm making investments today. I basically try and figure out, kind of, is this person, what's the trajectory of their learning curve? I think Mark talked about that. You got to be always learning. I think that's true. So that's how I think it's done. Unfortunately, I don't have time to answer more questions. It's really, really, really been an honor to be here. Thank you very much.